Welcome back. Caffeine and Cash Practices, Episode 2. Today, we're talking about why the hell are so many people starting cash practices? I get this question a lot. And partially, it's my fault because we've been sharing information on a cash practice, starting cash practices, the business around that now for about 5 or 6 years. If you're interested, head to wherever you listen to podcasts, go to the PT Entrepreneur Podcast, and we have over 500 episodes of content specifically on the business side of cash practices. So why are so many people starting them? Let me take you back in time a little bit. Whenever I started Athletes Potential, which was our cash practice, I started with my wife in 2014. Summer 2014. I left service in the Army. I remember signing out on a Friday from Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was awesome. I remember feeling so free driving home. You know that feeling when you first drove a car when you were 16 and by yourself and you just felt free? I felt that way. And then I had a oh shit moment of oh God, now what am I gonna do? I gotta figure this out. So that was a Friday, and on that Monday, we opened our practice. I had my first patient that day. And I remember the difficulty that I had was explaining to people what the heck a cash practice was and why I wasn't taking insurance. That was frankly the hardest part. People looked at me like I was being a jerk because I didn't want to take their insurance. And what they didn't realize was their insurance is the jerk, and I just didn't want to deal with it, and they're not really on their side either. So when I started, I knew of one other cash practice owner in the city of Atlanta, the whole city. And we were talking 6 million people at the time. And now, if I look at the landscape of cash practices in Atlanta, I can think of at least 40 that I know of, at least, probably more. And so how do you go from 2 to 40 over the last, let's call it 9 years? Well, that comes from a lot of people realizing that there's a better opportunity to use their skill set in a slightly different way. So even when we moved from the west side of Atlanta to the east side of Atlanta, where we set up our standalone space, when we did, there wasn't anybody within probably at least a 5 or 6 mile radius of us that was doing a cash or a fee-for-service practice or even a hybrid practice. And today, if you look at a 5 mile radius around our practice, there's probably 10 just around that one area. So it's growing, and you're seeing so many more of these practices. And I'm going to talk to you about why, because for some of you, it might be the best vehicle that you have available to leverage your skills as a clinician. Because here's where we're at, okay? You have gone to school, you've gotten an expensive degree, and you've taken on probably a good chunk of student debt. Unless you had somebody else paying for it, or you worked your way through school, or you joined the Army like I did, and then they paid for it because I was in the Army for 7 years. So there's other ways to go about it, but most people, they take on loans, right? They take on student debt, and that student debt, they have to repay it. But the student debt, on average, for the APTA states, it's about $150,000 of combined education carry cost that physical therapists are coming out of school with. The starting salary for a physical therapist is going to be somewhere around 75 grand, depending on where you're at, depending on the setting that you're in. So you have twice the amount of student loans as your starting salary coming out of school. That's a terrible exchange, to be honest. Let's just look at the numbers. That's not good. There's a lot of other reasons why we want to do the job. So when we look at the economics of this, what if we can take what we're doing with our degree and we can double that to actually be able to match what the overall student debt would be, or maybe more, right? And this is what people are seeing with cash practices. So when we look at a cash practice, there's a few drivers of what we're seeing of why so many people are doing this. So number one, it's a really good, what we call risk-adjusted opportunity. Meaning, you've already checked the box to get this degree. You already are carrying a lot of debt, right? So you don't have to go back and do that. You've already done that. What you don't have necessarily is a vehicle in which you can increase what you're making. So when we look at a risk-adjusted opportunity, it's how much is it going to cost me to start this business and how much can I potentially make, and the likelihood of success with that. So for less than a couple $1,000s, you can start a cash practice. And we see the vast majority of people, for instance, that we work with, if we get a chance to work with somebody for 2 years, there's a 93% chance that they are going to make over $20,000 a year. That's gross. Now, what they take home depends on the setting that they're in, but 93% chance that they're going to make $20,000 a month. So it's a very high likelihood if you do it right. and it only costs a few $1,000s to get started. And if you're wrong, you're not putting yourself in the hole $100,000 of a build out of a new space or something like that, or starting a franchise or something that maybe doesn't work. So the likelihood is high and the risk is low because you're not paying a whole lot. The other thing that's really important that is driving people towards this is that it's far less complex. So when we look at an in-network practice or a hybrid practice, these require a lot more infrastructure as far as billing is concerned in particular, and compliance with insurance, especially if you're going to take something like a government entity service like Medicare or Medicaid. That requires a lot more. So you spend a lot more time, a lot more money, a lot more energy. Even if you get a biller, you're looking at probably anywhere between 6 and 10% of what you're billing that they're going to take off the top. So it costs you more, it's more expensive, and it's more bloated. The business model is more bloated. So we see a lot of people that find this appealing because ultimately they just want to work with patients in a lower volume setting and make more money, and they don't want to deal with all of the red tape that comes along with big insurance companies. So it's far less complex than an in-network or a hybrid practice is, because the biggest thing is you don't have to deal with insurance companies at all. You can literally say, I'm not dealing with it, I'm going to give you a super bill, you figure it out on your own to your clients, and plenty of people do that, like successfully. We did that for years and years. So you don't even have to deal with insurance companies, which is awesome because they suck. No one likes to work with them. Like you call them and they give you the runaround. They waste your time. So you don't have to call them for approval or anything like that. So insurance companies completely out, and that's very, very appealing. The other thing that's great is you can define who you want to work with. So when we look at niches, there's a lot that work, right? You can look at like women's health, you can look at CrossFit, runners, golfers, overhead athletes, you want to work with baseball players, whatever. There's a lot of niches that work, but not everybody's niche is going to be the same because everybody has different interests in the type of clients that they want to work with. So when I started out, I was working with a lot of CrossFitters. I was training CrossFit, I was coaching CrossFit, I was working for CrossFit, teaching the movement and mobility trainer course. So like that was a group of people I really enjoyed being around. And it was like a dream come true for me to be able to show up at my office and be able to work with active adults, mainly CrossFitters, that were ultra compliant and that were paying me a certain amount of money per hour for my expertise to help them with a problem. It was great. And it was because everybody that came through the door was exactly who I would want to work with. It's who I would be like praying, please put this person on my schedule whenever I was in the Army. Please give me somebody that wants to like talk about their overhead position, with a snatch. Like that's who I wanted to talk to. That's what I wanted to work with. That's the problems I wanted to solve. And I got to do that and get paid for that. And the combination of that was awesome. So you get to define the niche that you really want to dominate and you want to focus on and work with those clients because you're actually appealing to them to come in to work with you. So the niche and the type of setup is really, really energizing as a clinician because it's the people that you like to work with. Which brings me to the next point, which is there's far less burnout. All right, let's talk about burnout for a second. Burnout is one of the biggest problems, not just in our profession, but clinically in healthcare in general. And there's a lot of factors for that. But in our profession in particular, it comes down to really high volume, so seeing 15, 20 plus people a day. And more than anything, it's the documentation and paperwork that is associated with that. And not to say you have to document defensible documentation in a cash practice, but it doesn't nearly have to be as detailed in a lot of ways as far as justification of why you need more visits or anything for insurance, because it's just between you and the client. So you're really documenting for yourself to know, all right, well, if they're better, worse, the same, what am I doing next time? Here's what I worked on. These progressions I'm looking at. So it's far less intricate in terms of documentation. And there's no paperwork at all. You don't have a bunch of these dumbass questionnaires you have to fill out that add a couple minutes per patient. And I remember working in a setting in Texas whenever I was working at a high volume clinic, and they added this thing called Photo. And Photo was basically a survey that helped justify outcomes. Basically, we looked at objective outcomes that people were getting and subjective outcomes. And when they told us, they were like, oh, it's only going to take like 30 seconds. Well, even if that was true, 30 seconds, times 20 people, that's an extra 10 minutes of my life that I don't get back because of this. So the reality was it didn't take 30 seconds. And it's because we had a very high Medicare population and there were no iPads. So this was 2009, 2010. Imagine trying to take an 85-year-old person through a questionnaire on a laptop. It's not Easy. They don't know what the hell's going on. They're like pushing the screen. It would easily take minutes of us trying to figure this out. So all of a sudden, let's say it's taking us 2 minutes per person to take them through this, and it was damn near every visit they came in. You just added 40 plus minutes to my day of taking somebody through this stupid questionnaire that had nothing to do with me actually helping them get better. All it was probably trying to help that clinic justify how they could get more money for what they were doing, right? So, and that happens over and over and over again, and it bloats the visit. It takes away from what the true visit should be, which is me and you trying to solve a problem together and getting you back to the shit you like to do. That's it. Keep it super simple. So all that causes so much burnout, tons of volume and tons of work with stuff that you don't want to do. And the other big thing is patient populations that are high work comp or high, in some cases, Medicare, just like populations you maybe don't feel thrilled to work with. If you want to work with more of a sports med population, an athletic population, or more of a performance clinic in a lot of ways, that burns you out. You're working with people that you don't find a lot of enjoyment out of working with. And in particular, if you're working with somebody and they're not wanting to get better, I would get this a lot. I would have work comp patients that would come in, and it'd be like, dude, you're working on a grade 1 plus ankle sprain for a year now. What's going on? Oh, you're in litigation. You don't have your court date until a certain time. It's not advantageous for them to get better. Why would they want to get better and decrease what they could get from a work comp, personal injury standpoint? I get it, but I don't want to work with those people because it frustrates me. Like, I don't want to try if you don't want to try. And for a lot of people, that burns them out quite a bit. It's not the volume of work, it's the type of work. So lower volume helps, but working with the right people and working with motivated people, for me at least, it mitigated the vast majority of the burnout that I felt. And I was getting it pretty bad. I was getting a lot of it. So when you look at burnout, this is one of the big areas that we solve. So the last thing, and one of the main reasons that we really like it so much, is that people have skin in the game. And when they have skin in the game because they're paying. And when they pay attention. So if you want ultra compliant patients, they're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you never ever have to question if what you're doing is the right thing or not. Like, if you've ever been there and you're like, man, do I suck as a clinician? Am I doing the wrong things? Because this person's just not getting better, and I think I'm doing all the right stuff. I don't know if they're being compliant or whatever. You'll never ever ask yourself that, because why would somebody come and pay you $200 an hour and not do what you said? Like, it would be a complete waste of time and money. So that never happens, and that helps so much when it comes to burnout and feeling energized to work with the people you're working with. So cash practices are exploding right now for these reasons. You can make more money, it's less complex, it's more of just a pure relationship between you and a patient, the way that it really should be. That's what I actually love the most about it, and it's far, far less volume and far less paperwork that you're dealing with, which really lets you have more energy, not just in the clinic, but for when you get home. For the people that you want to spend time with, for your friends and family, and doing the things you like to do outside of the clinical environment. Because guys, we have life outside of work, outside of what we do in the clinic. And many of you are so tired, by the time you get home, you have nothing left over to spend that energy with the people that you're working for, your family and your friends, to do the things that you enjoy. So you're wasting it in the clinic because you're getting burnt out. And a cash practice, in a lot of ways, alleviates a lot of that. It's not the right fit for everybody, but for the right person, it can be an incredible way to leverage your skills in a slightly different way, make more money, see less people, have less burnout, and have more impact with the people that you really like to work with. So I hope this helps. We're going to keep answering questions that we get, big questions around cash practices and lessons learned that we have. If you have any questions, here's what I would recommend. Go ahead and email admin@physicaltherapybiz.com. Shoot us a question, and we will try to get the episode up and answer your questions. You can also hit me up on Instagram. Go to Danny Mattei PT, DANNY MATTA PT, as in physical therapist, on Instagram. Hit me up with a question in a direct message. That's a good place to reach me. And if you want to learn more, go to physicaltherapybiz.com. We got a ton of free resources there, like our case study of clients that we're working with, 5-day challenge. You can go through all of our case studies that we have and just get a better idea of what people are doing in different cities and states, and see what success they're having as well. So guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.